Trace said this afternoon that he felt Tuesday was the best practice that you guys had all year. Did you agree with that?
Yeah, I said that after practice. I don't know if he's basing that off of film or what I said after practice, but I thought it was the best practice we've had in 4 years since we've been here.
That's
Why
what he
was
said,
it?
yeah.
Why was it the best practice?
I think one of the biggest things that probably doesn't get talked about enough is the scout teams. Our scout teams are completely different than they were 4 years ago, 3 years ago, 2 years ago. It's much more competitive. They have a legitimate, ability to replicate what we're going to face. In years past, you would get the speed of the game on Saturday, and you wouldn't really get it unless we went good on good. So, I think that's probably something that's not talked about enough. The importance and the impact of the quality of your scout team, and ours is getting to a point where the scout players are getting better, they're having fun, they're competing, and they're challenging. Where in years past you'd be fighting like crazy to get those guys to practice at a certain level, and then when they would, the travel squad, the varsity guys, wouldn't be ready for it, and it just would be a mess. So, the standard and the expectation of how we practice on scout team with the travel squad, it's just different. It's just different. So when you're watching it, it looks like real football. It looks like game-like situations with the speed, with the physicality of it. And then the other thing is we're athletic enough that we were able to play that fast and we're able to play that aggressive without people falling all over the ground, because that's the other thing. We want to stay off the ground so we don't get anybody rolled up and things like that. So it just looks different.
Would you consider the development of a strong scout team like that an overlooked aspect of recruiting success?
I think it's a huge overlooked aspect in general. I think you guys know, the first couple of years we had some challenges just with scholarship numbers alone and putting together a starting squad. I think it's a major aspect. I think you spend so much time talking about, guys, how many guys play as true freshmen, but the developmental aspect of college football is almost seems like it's a dying breed. Like you don't focus on that as much anymore. It's all about coming in, playing as a true freshman, and trying to leave after 3 years. And the reality is, such a small percentage of guys, it plays out that way. Where most of the guys, it's a developmental process. So I'm pleased with what we've done there. I think I've said this before. I think that's one of the things we've done a pretty good job of over our 8 years is developing guys. All the way back to our time at Vanderbilt. There's this impression out there that we're recruiters. Let's be honest. At Vanderbilt we were able to get some guys that they hadn't really gotten there before. But who are we really beating for recruits? We developed guys there and got better and had success, and we've been able to do the same thing here. And based on rankings and things like that, they say we're recruiting a little bit better, but we haven't lost that developmental background, which I take a lot of pride in.
How much of a challenge is it to get those guys on the scout team to understand nuances? Like one of the things we were down there watching, somebody was talking about outside shoulder on everything. How hard is it to get you? Because you have young guys usually running it. How hard is it to get them to understand that?
Well, it shouldn't be as hard as you think, because we literally show them a card, with it all drawn up and lines on where they're supposed to go. And our GAs do an unbelievable job. The D-line's in one color, the linebackers are in another color, the DBs are in another color. But it obviously is different when you're drawing a line through a card and the O-line hasn't moved, but then they move. And you got to make them understand if you got the A-gap, you got to stay in the A-gap and those types of things. But, that's where guys, like Schumann, people don't realize the value that guy has brought to our organization. Like Frankie Pipes, like Veronic. Those guys have been unbelievable. And I talked about that with the scout team yesterday. All these guys are going to have different journeys here. Some are going to work on a scout team and they're going to evolve to having roles on Saturdays. And there's going to be other guys that for 4 or 5 years, their role never really changes. But I can guarantee you that Schumann and Veronic and Frankie, those guys are going to leave this program, have earned everybody's respect. and they're going to be able to come back to the Big Ten championship. What do they call it when people come back? Reunion. Thank you. And feel really proud of what they accomplished here. I mean, those guys have had huge impacts on how we practice and teaching the young guys how we do things. There's a culture now with those types of things. So, I think that's one of the biggest improvements in our program right now is the depth of our scout teams. The next step is the depth of guys that we play on Saturdays.
James, Trace was asked earlier today if he feels like he belongs in the Heisman conversation. He said he couldn't, say that, he did belong. I'm just curious, you've seen what he's capable of. Do you think he belongs at this point? And what would your message be to voters who maybe wrote him off after the Ohio State game?
I would think in a lot of ways it would be the opposite. You wouldn't write him off after the Ohio State game. He was the Big Ten Player of the Week, in my opinion. I don't care what anybody says. He played like crazy. Again, those things are not things that we spend a whole lot of time talking about or worrying about. Sometimes the marketing department does things. I get all that, but we're worried about Michigan State, and those things are for the media to discuss and for fans to vote on and all that kind of stuff. We're focused on Michigan State. Yeah, I think it's a combination of our O-line and our tight ends. I think it's also a combination of Trace's production, running the ball as well. I think it's all of those things. I think you'll see a really good combination of both Miles and Ricky this week. And yeah, we got a challenge. The thing that we can't do is we got to be patient with the run game. These guys are giving up 33 yards a game, running. And I think the mistake that you make is when you're playing a team like that is you abort the run and just go all pass, which is what they want you to do. Now their D-line's able to tee off on you. So we got to be patient with it. I think we're looking at it, and I know our O-line and tight ends and running backs and coaches are looking at it as a challenge. Obviously that's where you also have to be balanced, because if a team is stopping you running the ball or throwing the ball, you have to be able to do the other one effectively.
Hey James, do you guys have a scoring mentality? Points like primacy? Like your number, you're averaging 31 points in the second half, which is the best half of anybody in college football over the past 15 years.
So are you asking me, do we have a number?
No, do you give them mentality, like you want points rather than yards?
Oh yeah. I think it's always about points. And those points are impacted by our offense. Those points are impacted by our defense. Those points are impacted by special teams. All of it. It's never about yards. It's always about points. And offensively, it's always about scoring one more point. It's not about scoring 50 points. It's about scoring one more point than our defense gives up, and vice versa for our defense. But it's always points driven, because the reality is, if you're getting turnovers or having big special teams plays, you could score 50 points and have very little offensive yardage based on your field position. So yeah, it's always about points for us, and always has been.
When you guys went back and looked at it, the tackling from the first 5 games, how did you assess that? You mentioned earlier, obviously, you don't want guys on the ground at this point. How do you guys maybe go about making some of those adjustments with positioning, with obviously not doing the banging and all those kinds of things?
Yeah, I think we have gotten a lot better in our tackling from the beginning of the season to now. There's been times, obviously, that it showed up that we've missed tackles against other really good players in space. Really what you want to try to do defensively is you try to limit, the amount of times where you are trying to tackle a really good player in space. That's where pursuit is so important. So, obviously we don't want to miss any tackles, but if you do miss a tackle, you want to miss it on the right leverage so that the other 10 guys that are running to the ball, that's what we want to try to do. That's happened a few times, but I think we've improved, a good degree from the beginning of the season to now.
We've heard from you, and I know the team has all last week about focusing on the little things, going from great to elite, but you're still not sure what they're going to look like when they hit the field Tuesday. For them to kind of give that validating performance, be ready to roll, best practice you've seen here, what does that mean to you?
I think it's an example that we have handled some adversity well. the coaches, the players. Obviously, the bye week helped with that. I get that, but I think we've handled some adversity well. We'll have some more on Saturday. It'll show up, but I think when you have a mature football team, they're able to take adversity, learn from the challenges, learn from the issues, make the corrections, grow from the corrections, use some of those things to drive us from a motivation perspective further. And that's kind of what I've seen from our team. I understand the bye week did help us, but I've been pleased with our approach.
You guys have seemingly revamped your nutrition program for the last 2 years, making that an emphasis. You mentioned a few times yesterday. How do you gauge, I guess, where that was a couple years ago to in the spring you highlighted to now? What are maybe some of those gains that you've seen there that we probably wouldn't notice otherwise?
Well, I think the first thing is we got somebody that's constantly educating our players about choices. We're able to provide a lot more healthy options in our facility. Subtle changes that we have made to the food that we eat in the hotels. But I think the biggest thing, it's like anything else, it's educating. And we got somebody that's constantly educating our players every day, every week about just making better choices. And then obviously where it shows up is when we do some of the bod pods, and we're able to look at all the data from the first 4 years of what we've been able to do with the weight room change in our bodies. And then I think we've had a higher increase in being able to reduce our body fat and increase our lean muscle mass. And I think that's a combination of what we're doing in the weight room, and it's a combination of some of the choices and the education that we have when it comes to nutrition. I think it's a combination of all those things.
Thank you, Coach.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.